All right, card number 47 from the Bowman color set, which has absolutely nothing to do with what we're going to talk about tonight, but it is session 47, so that's why we do it, because it's fun. So this is Card Room Live. Welcome to everybody. If you're catching this live and you're in the chat, as always, I encourage you to introduce yourselves to the folks in the chat. If you're new, if you're a new YouTuber, if you're thinking about making a YouTube channel, introduce yourself. You're amongst collectors and friends, so it'd be a good idea to do it. If you're listening to this later, if you're walking your dog, if you're driving home from work, if you're sitting on the John, if you're updating your saved searches on eBay, I hope you enjoy it. We have some good guests tonight. And we're going to get to that in just a second. Let's see who's in here. We got Mr. John Mangini. We got Jesse's here. Don is here. Rick is here. Doug is here. Lots of good people are here. And sure there's going to be more to come. A's fan Jim. Okay, so we're going to jump into it, guys. This is a live stream that I've been wanting to do for a little while, and we finally were able to make it happen. You got to pull strings. You got to pull strings to make things happen, and you got to talk to people, and you got to get people to talk to your people and all that good stuff. And we have to cross time zones to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce these folks. First of all, coming all the way from the other side of the world, we've got Mr. Tony, aka JP Wisco. How you doing, Tony?
Pretty good. Happy to be here.
Great to have you, man. This is something I've been wanting to do for a long time, and this is your first time on this, right?
It's my first time on this, yes.
Okay, awesome. This is going to be fun. And a man who doesn't need an introduction. So I'm just going to bring him in because everybody knows who this guy is. Zombie Collector, aka Jason.
Well, hello there, gentlemen.
How you doing, buddy?
Good. I thought about doing like a little song and dance across the camera, and I felt like maybe that's just too much right out of the gate. So I sat down the very last second because I don't want you to be like, oh God, this guy right out of the gate. So,
dude, I mean, I feel like I just saw it in my head, so it's all good.
It's probably better there than in real life. So
for sure. Cool. So the three of us were talking about this, like, it feels like at least a month, maybe. And it's just been difficult to kind of get it to happen. Tony, what time is it where you are?
9 in the morning.
9 in the morning. No better way to start the morning than a live stream, right?
Yeah, I get up early.
Awesome. So I'm sure everybody knows what this is about. Tony and Jason, aside from being YouTubers and sports card collectors, also have strong ties to Japan, Japanese baseball, and card collecting. And so that's what I wanted to talk about. And I've got some questions here for you guys, but I would love to have other guys in the chat throw some questions your way too. And we'll keep an eye on the chat. I'll keep an eye on it and see if any questions come up. But Tony and Jason, let's see. Before we get into it, I want to get a sense of like where you guys are coming from, because if you don't know Tony, you don't know Jason, the first question is going to be like, all right, how did these two Americans get into Japan, Japanese history, Japanese baseball, and collecting? So, Tony, we'll start with you. What's your connection to Japan, to Japanese baseball?
Well, I've been in Japan almost 10 years now. I'll spare you guys the long version, the life story. Anyone who wants to get at me and, chat with me, I'd be more than happy to, share the life story. But anyway, short version, I've been here about 10 years. So obviously, living here, you're surrounded by it and you can't really help but get into it. Even before I came to Japan, I was into Ichiro, and, I can't say like I was like super into like, Japanese stuff. Well, I mean, like I was into like video games and stuff as a kid. I'm like a big Street Fighter nerd. But that's more like incidental, like that I'm here. It's not like the reason I'm here, right?
Right.
But like in terms of like the Japanese cards themselves and stuff like that, it's honestly for me, I it's a fairly new thing. Like I haven't actually like, you know, collected Japanese cards and Japanese players, you know, besides like Ichiro and stuff for like very long.
Right.
It's honestly a pretty new thing for me. I would say a couple years, 2 or 3. So,
Right. Okay. Jason, how about you?
It's kind of like the same as what Tony was saying. I'm not going to get into too many details. People who follow my channel have seen me around for years. Well, I've probably heard a lot of this already, but the Cliff Notes version is I started going to Japan in '98. My son's mother's Japanese, so I lived there till about 2010, so about 12 years off and on. And I was in Japan back in the day when Fukuoka was the Dai Hawks, opposed to the SoftBank Hawks in the olden days, which we'll probably talk a little bit about. Unlike in America, where it's usually the same team name since the beginning. In Japan, they changed the names of their teams. It seems like every couple of years, sometimes, depending on who owns them or whatnot. But I was always a fan of all things Japan growing up, and when I had the opportunity to go in college, I definitely took it. And then I didn't know anything about Japanese baseball. All thing I knew about Japan was Nomo Mania back in the 90s, and that was kind of like a big thing here stateside. And outside of that, I didn't know much about it. But it coincided about the time I got into Japan was Ichiro. So I remember Ichiro was big in the 90s before he got over here, and
Right.
it was all the rage. And so I kind of took that passion for loving baseball in America, and then living in Japan, and kind of put it together to kind of how I got to where I am today. So
Right. Okay. Awesome. So, I mean, Tony, you're there, and Jason, you've spent a lot of time there. One of the things I was definitely going to ask you, we talked about maybe doing this a couple weeks back. And that's when what I want to ask you about was probably more on everybody's mind. And we have this bad habit in our culture of like forgetting something that happened, you know, a couple days ago. But I think this is still relevant and something I really want to like hear from you guys about, which is the World Baseball Classic. And you know, Japan, of course, winning, and Ohtani and that last game. And what were your guys' takeaways from that? I mean, like, were you following it? And like, what did you think about it? And like, did you hear anything about it? Like, how does, you know, I don't know if you guys know or anything, but just like how is the reception of everything that happened? How's that been?
go ahead, Tony. You live there, so I'll let you go first.
sure. Well, obviously it was pretty huge here. My immediate thought, especially after the sort of like we know how it turned out and Japan won and stuff, it's like the next World Baseball Classic, the final deserves to be here. It doesn't deserve to be in Miami or, I mean, like my first thought was like, so I think one of the group games against Korea that was in prime time here because some of the group games were played, you know, and so people actually got to see that. And like 60 million Japanese people watched that game on TV.
Wow.
The final, because of the way the timing worked out, because it was back in the US, right? It was in Miami. So people didn't really get to watch it.
Yeah.
But I can't really imagine if a group stage game had half of the country was tuned into that, like what the final would have been like. And my guess is like, honestly, you know, people here are pretty reserved and keep to themselves and they're personal and stuff like that. But like that final strike, like that strikeout of Trout, like if that had been in prime time and people were home watching that thing, like I honestly think there would have been people in the street. Like it would be like, you know, and Alex, this is kind of in tune with some of your recent interests about like the shot heard around the world and stuff where,
Yeah.
or the Brooklyn Dodgers finally winning the World Series where the sort of like, you know, the dense residential neighborhoods where sort of people were in the streets. And I honestly think in like residential neighborhoods here, it would have been like that. And I mean, I know like the final of the next classic will not be in Tokyo or anything, but it deserves to be in Tokyo.
No, that's really interesting. Jason, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak from, it was kind of cool. My son was there with his mom during the World Baseball Classic, and I've never seen a 14-year-old American kid be that excited about baseball because it's such a huge thing. I mean, he was telling me about the updates every day, about how Tani was doing, how Darvish was doing, how the team was doing. He brought back with him that Lars Newbar apparently does this thing with he's grinding the pepper or something. And so now my son does that every day while he whenever he hits a double, he's out on there doing this, and it's like that just should tell you that goes back with what Tony was saying about how impactful it is in Japan. I remember when I was there before, and I'm assuming it's like this, Tony, you can speak to this too, was that there are literally TVs out in the streets. People stop what they're doing and watching it in the streets. And it is like a national, it's like a national experience. The psyche of Japanese people are connected to this experience, and in Japan is very big and about Japanese pride and about anything they do, but especially when it comes to world sports or whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of pride there. And I completely agree with Tony. I think if they played those games in Japan, at least, especially the ones of Japan's in the finals, I feel like you would see a completely different, experience there. And it's funny because, in America, you have so many coaches and you have players and you have commentators that are kind of, complaining about the players possibly getting hurt and they shouldn't be playing. Right. They should be taking this time to rest and get ready and just work out with their teams. And in Japan, they're let's send all the best of the best. We want them to play. Everybody's invested. So it's a completely different mindset, I think, from America to Japan. And you can see with the reaction, as Tony was alluding to, how big it was and how much bigger it would have been if they would have held it in Japan. So.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really cool. And it seems to me like more and more people are paying attention to it. As a result, which can only be good for baseball. So I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I don't know. Somebody can maybe correct me in the comments, or maybe you all know. But in America, I heard a statistic, and I know I won't get the numbers right, but they said there were more people watching the World Baseball Classic that last couple of games, at least the last game in particular, than there was every World Series combined in the last 15 years or something crazy, some crazy statistic like that. So that should just tell you as baseball fans or fans of American baseball, how big this sport is in other parts of the world and how we need to find better ways to promote it, especially if we're going to have these kind of games in other countries, that we're letting them in on the action, opposed to bringing it back here where the level of interest is there, but not compared to other countries like Japan, so to speak.
And I mean, to that point too, it's as much as, here in Japan, baseball is firmly the most popular team sport. Whereas, of course, in the United States, it used to be that way and now it's not. But even here where it is the most popular sport, you do see, at least you did, but it might be changing because of Ohtani and because of this, where baseball was starting to be viewed much the same way that people started to view it. Kids started to view it, back in the US, it's stiff, it's tradition bound, particularly here in Japan, because you might not know, well, Jason knows, but you might not know that high school baseball has an almost militant rigidity to it. So members of high school baseball teams, they all have to shave their heads, buzz cuts, nobody stands out. They practice, probably more than college players practice in the United States. And so a lot of kids wanted to push, baseball was losing out to soccer, or because kids just didn't like it.
Right.
They didn't like the very stern discipline, the almost sort of militant take on practice and things like that. So it was losing out for a while. There were articles about it, but now it's Jason brought up the pepper grinder. I smiled when I read some articles. High school kids were doing the pepper grinder celebration. they'd get on base and stuff. And of course, the angle was some like no fun wet blanket or something was like telling them not to do it and stuff. But the point is like that baseball's back, man. Like even here, it's like I see so many kids with Angels hats and stuff where I didn't used to see that pre-Ohtani and things like that. So I think this last WBC was just very good for baseball, and it just really makes me feel good because baseball is by far my favorite sport. So
yeah. Man, so many good feelings right now. Cool. That is so good to hear. Gosh, well, I don't exactly know how to get into this, guys. So I'm just going to kind of throw stuff at you and see what you think. I'm curious, like, to get a sense of, what's it like to, I mean, you guys kind of already threw a couple things in here that I was surprised to hear about, like, the militant style of coaching for high school teams, or Jason, you mentioned that it's really common for players to change, teams to change the names of their teams. What are some other things that maybe you were surprised about, or maybe that like a typical American baseball fan would be surprised to hear in terms of like maybe the way the game is played, or just like the way teams are run, or any of that sort of thing?
The first thing that pops out to me, I'm sure, again, Tony has probably more experiences being there much longer than me and more consistently. But one of the first things, because I went to a couple of games without friends or family, and I went sometimes with friends and family, and it is a different experience. And so you see things kind of a different way. Like the couple of times I went kind of on my own, I was just so focused on trying to get to the stadium and trying to find my seat and try to make sure, like, I was doing everything right and on time. I was kind of just like had like, blinders on. But when I would go with friends and family, the one thing I noticed that you never say never, but I don't think you would ever see in America was that a lot of in Japan, you see a lot of people, they'll have like a deity or some kind of like religious symbol in front of the stadium or in front of the field. Well, they will pray to it, the fans, before they go into the game. And like at least at SoftBank Hawks now, that I remember going and people would sit there and they would clap, they would pray, they would put stuff on this like deity, like their god or whatever, and they would have this like religious experience prior to the game beginning for good luck, essentially, to win the game or whatever. I mean, I don't think we would probably see too much of that in America, unless you're at a Catholic college or something like Notre Dame, maybe, kind of, sort of. But like in a professional football, baseball, basketball thing, where people are going to start like praying to whatever god. And in Japan, that's like commonplace. You see those kind of things. I saw that on TV before. And that to me was very surprising, because like you literally have people who are like, stop what they're doing, throngs of people all around, and they're all like gathered around like this entity praying to it before the game. So that was the one thing I think that sticks out of my mind.
That's really interesting. I've never seen it.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, but that's not like, for example, I know like in sumo and stuff, like a lot of the things that they do in sumo are basically religious rituals. So throwing salt on the ring and things like that are all bound into those are basically religious practices. So that's interesting. I mean, maybe I should get down to the stadium earlier or something. I don't go, like, I've never been, maybe 30 minutes before or so. Interesting. I should keep an eye out for that kind of thing.
Right, and maybe that's only a SoftBank Hawks in Fukuoka where I live. I don't know, because I've only been there a couple of times, so I don't want to swear by that's every stadium. But I just remember being so surprised, because you run into them with your like food, like your takoyaki or whatever. You're like carrying it over around, and there's like all these people around, like just prayerfully worshiping this thing, and you're like, I'm just trying to find B7 so I can sit down. And so yes. So that's one. What about you, Tony? Did you say you have something else that's very different about the game?
Well, obviously, I think, people might have been exposed. This is sort of the obvious thing. It's not quite as cool of an anecdote as the religious things, but most people are probably exposed to this during the WBC, that the crowd is very different. So it's definitely more like a soccer crowd. You've got big banners waving and trumpets and chants and songs and things. Generally, each player has like the team will be, they'll chant each individual player on and sing songs and wave banners and things like that. So the crowd is maybe somewhat ironically a little more raucous than like American crowds that are generally very, obviously will cheer if, someone hits a home run or makes an awesome diving catch, the stadium will erupt, but it's these little moments of eruption, whereas the Japanese crowds are pretty much just on a sort of high level boil the entire time. So that's probably the biggest difference, I would say. Like if you come here and you want to experience, it's a diamond and an outfield and the dimension, what's different about it? That's definitely one of the sort of immediately different things about the game experience here.
Right.
Yeah. And that's true. What he said that it's like a party in there and on the field. Which the other thing I would say also, and again, I'm sure Tony will have seen this and know about it. Every team they have like a fan section who has like a song that's like for their team. Their specific team has a like theme song that you don't in America. You don't have that unless you're at a college, that they have their like fight song or whatever. But like pro teams don't have their like theme song or whatever. They also have cheerleaders, which you don't see in America for baseball, but they have cheerleaders out there cheering on the fans. That's obviously a little bit of a different thing. These aren't like big things, but it is something that separates them from the American experience of the game.
Right. Yeah, the seventh. During the seventh inning stretch here is traditionally when you like sing the team song. Okay. So everyone during the seventh inning stretch, there's as Jason said, there's kind of like basically like a fight song, and everybody sings it during the seventh inning stretch.
Right.
And the actual and this is also very Japanese. It's very like courteous and accommodating. They also allow the opposing fans to sing theirs.
So. Oh, wow.
Very nice. Really nice.
Wow. I love that. That's very, very revealing. Yeah. Okay. I can feel it. I can feel somebody saying we need to look at cards. I can sense it. Someone's about to say, show some cards. So Tony or Jason, I'm wondering like, what are some of the earliest cards you've got? Vintage cards. Do you have any vintage cards for Japanese players?
That would definitely be more Tony up there because I don't have really any vintage related cards. So I even want to see what Tony's going to show.
Earliest? Oh man, I'm not sure what my earliest is. I definitely have some that are probably late 40s. I will show this thing because this is something you're not going to see every day.
Way to start.
And this is from, I believe, the late 40s. I have this, I have this paper doll of a baseball player.
Wow.
And now this is not, the doll itself, I believe, is not a specific player. But I believe this dates to the late 40s. And it has the original envelope and everything. And I was like heart beating trying to put the envelope in this thing because it's like onion skin. It's just going to disintegrate in my hand.
Yeah.
But this, I believe, is from the late 40s. And the reason is because some of the characters on here are old form. So the government kind of simplified at some point after the war. The government simplified some of the kanji, but this has some old style kanji on it. In terms of details on this, I'm not really sure. I did discuss with our friend Robert, Prestige Collectibles, great channel. He's an auctioneer, but we both couldn't really find too many details, but riddles and enigmas, so that's kind of part of the appeal. So
it looks like the arms and legs move.
Yeah, it still works. Yeah, so really cool. The guy, he flaps around or whatever if you pull.
That's awesome.
So that's like maybe one of the oldest things I have. I know the cards or Manko or whatever, they date pretty early back, but
right.
That's among the
Well,
oldest things that I have.
since you brought it up, Menko, can you show us some? Can you give us a sense, like, because I hear that everybody that collects cards has probably heard Menko before, but like, what exactly are they?
Sure. So Menko is basically it's a game, and it's basically if you're a '90s kid like me, or you're older than me, so you remember, you probably remember Pogs from the '90s. And Pogs were this game you'd stack these little circular discs and you'd try to, and then there were different ways to play it, but if you got them face up, you could keep your opponent's Pogs, or you could trade them like cards or whatever. So Menko is a game that is much like that.
Right.
And they come in. Well, I guess I'll just show this one. I know John Mangini has one of these too, but this is uncut Menko sheet.
Wow.
And the guy up here, that's Joey D. That's the Yankee Clipper.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, this is like the kind of the standard size of maybe like a rectangular shaped Menko, but they also come in circles. There are other star players on here. This is Victor Starfin, who is a Russian who won 300 plus games in the Japanese leagues. He died tragically young in like a train accident or something. This is one of my favorite Japanese players. Obviously, these portraits are quite crude of them, so I can show more of him. But this is Fumio Fujimura, who is a really remarkable player. Two-way player, player manager. He's a Hall of Famer for the Tigers. And this is, I think, Takeshi Doigaki is a catcher. I think he's the only one who's not a Hall of Famer on this, but yeah. So Menko's, like I said, this is like the kind of standard rectangular Menko shape.
Mhm.
But they also come in circles. And actually, circles those are more like Pogs, right? Because we remember Pogs were always circular. They weren't, rectangular or anything.
Tony,
They could also be
do you
die
still
cut.
have- Tony, do you
They
still
could
have-
also be die cut.
Oh, okay.
Like this one is a little bit sort of like die cut.
Right.
And with these sort of cartoony portraits of the players. Let me find a circular Menko just so that you can. So this is my guy Fumio Fujimura again. Like I said, this is one of those guys, remarkable sort of, at least particularly in the West, but maybe also in Japan, sort of unheralded player. This guy was something else.
Awesome. I'm definitely gonna go back through this video and like get some of these names, because that's gonna be another question for me. Is like, what are some of the names from this era of Japanese baseball that like people should look into in terms of just learning about like their history and their performance.
Yeah.
I want to say though, I think it's kind of cool. People probably don't know unless they live in the Louisville area, but which is where I'm from originally. The Louisville, Kentucky, they made the Louisville Bat Factory, right? So that's where they made for hundreds of years or whatever. They were making the baseball bats for every baseball player until I would say modern time. It's becoming a little bit less. You see that, but they still do. But Japanese, no, Tony hasn't got to it yet, but I'm sure he can show. But you have Sando Haruo, and they even have his bats, which are not necessarily Louisville Slugger bats, in the Louisville Slugger Museum, because they respect what he did in Japan so much as like the home run king and things of that sort. Right. I think it's very cool to show and say that even some place in Louisville, Kentucky, that's so far away from Japan, they recognize the awesomeness of a lot of the Japanese ball players, especially O-san, and they even have some of his original bats on display in the Louisville Slugger Museum, which I just love.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I think pretty cool. There he is.
Awesome.
So I have this one.
Yeah, I've asked Tony about trying to find O cards, and I definitely want to get one at some point, but they are up there.
Yeah, maybe about 10 or 15 years ago, you could have been getting them easily, but now I think the cat's out of the bag.
Well, that's true, and also like I think one thing most of the players are still actually really affordable. So, like I said before, well, I mean they might be harder to get a hold of just because American collectors aren't so into them. But like guys like Fumio Fujimura, like I said, this dude is just a remarkable player, Hall of Famer. There's no way his prices are even close to like or Shigeo Nagashima, the other sort of like big player. So there are opportunities to like get some of these guys, some of these legendary players.
I will say that I was looking at O's cards, and that's one of the biggest names, right? But some of his like cards from let's say the 70s were totally affordable. I think because I'm more interested in the earlier stuff, that stuff is first. I'm not seeing as much of it, and when I do, it's a little pricey. But there's definitely affordable stuff out there. Here's a good question from Orlando. I don't have any Japanese cards. What cards would you recommend to start? And I'm going to guess he's thinking about vintage players.
Man, that's such an open-ended question. I suppose it's kind of hard to answer. I mean, and obviously, like Orlando has an amazing collection. I guess I can kind of get into that with like. Alex, I know I recommended this set to you, and I know there are some YouTubers who have cards from this set, and I have about half of them, but this is from the 64 Morinaga set. So these are kind of like bigger. These aren't Menko I know we might get into like the different kinds of cards, so not like a Menko card. But this set is just an awesome set, great photography. It's a pretty small set. I think there's 12 or so cards in it. Really nice, big photography. Getting one of these, you can't really go wrong. And then another piece of advice might be to get this player. This is Katsuya Nomura, who is one of the greatest. Well, I would say together with Josh Gibson, like the best catcher who never played in the National League or the American League. So this dude is number 2 all time in home runs in Japanese baseball. He's got 600 plus. He trails only O in home runs. By the way, he's also second all time in hits in Japanese baseball. I think 2,900. And there is one guy in Japanese baseball who has 3,000 hits. Japanese hits, right? And that's actually this guy, Isao Harimoto. The guys you might recognize, that's Sadaharu on the right, but Harimoto's on the left, and he is the all-time NPB hits leader, and he's the only member of the Japanese 3,000 hits club. So anyway, I kind of digress, but Nomura was such a remarkable player. 600, so this is Nomura too. This is a Menko. 600 something home runs, 2,900 hits. By the way, he was a catcher. Well, I already mentioned that because of Josh Gibson, but
right.
And basically, but the thing with Nomura was that he was really overshadowed like his entire career because he was a contemporary of like Sadaharu O and Shigeo Nagashima, like these huge stars on the Giants, and he didn't play for the Giants. So he just didn't really get, this was a Colby. This is later when he was a manager for the Hawks. But so he was kind of like, he felt like he never got his due, despite being, 600 something home runs, 2,900 hits, and he's a catcher. But you never hear his name, right? Along with like Sadaharu and stuff. So definitely. So my point is, like, as to Orlando's question, like maybe just look for some of these players that aren't. I mean, I recommend getting like O cards, right? Like and the big. So you could certainly start there. But just have fun with it because a lot of them are just really affordable. Like if they're not Sadaharu O, especially in the West, like they're just really affordable. And, you can get players like, this is actually like a signature book, but this is like Fumio Fujimura, I said, right? Like this guy, player manager, two-way player, and just like a really tough guy. Apparently, during the war, this guy actually, his buddy basically got blown to pieces, but you had to find, you had to, as best as you could, you had to get remains for burial. So he basically, during the war, he had his buddy's arm in a sling around his neck for like a week. And then, like I said, he was actually a two-way player that no one talks about and also a player manager. So Fumio Fujimura or Katsuya Nomura, guys like that, I think, are just like really good buys.
Thank you for that intense anecdote, Tony.
Yeah, that's pretty intense. Like that's
Yeah, Ted Williams never did that for anybody.
Yeah, Ted Williams, he was flying planes around, but
Right.
I don't know if he had his dead buddy's arm around his neck.
Right.
Anyway, yeah. So just like we can get more into it stuff, like as to like Orlando's question. Like I think it's like pretty overwhelming, maybe for someone.
Well,
but
I mean,
so my best advice is just like just sort of like dive in because a lot of it is like pretty affordable. So.
I mean, a couple people have said it already. It's a whole new rabbit hole to go down, which is I think why a lot of people are overwhelmed by it and maybe just kind of stay away from it. I kind of feel like part of me is I'm definitely interested. I mean, that's why I have you guys on here to talk about it. And to me, I guess subconsciously, I just kind of thought, would be a great place to start, and that I would eventually start to open up new ideas as I started to learn more about the players and the history of it. You got to start.
I think O is a great place to start.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
So it's certainly in terms of like where should I say? Yeah, start with O. He's just by far the priciest player you're gonna buy.
Right.
So.
Question for both you guys. Just was thinking about this as you were going through those cards. Are there? Because I'm completely ignorant of the whole thing. Are there teams that are more popular than others? Are there teams that have been around longer? Are there teams that have sort of a let's say a Yankees vibe or a Red Sox vibe? Like, can you think of any like comparisons?
Sure. Well, like Tony already alluded to it, but the Yomiuri Giants are the Yankees of Japan. Okay. So kind of like what he was alluding to a moment ago, like you had like the Stan Musials, and you have like just pick any other random player that wasn't a Yankee, and then it's like their level of collectability or knowledge of the regular fan was a lot lower than if you're like a Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, whatever, right? So O was super famous in Japan, but these other guys that weren't on the Giants, they didn't have the same level of knowledge or excitement because they weren't on the premier team, right?
Right.
So you have that in Japan. And I do, and again, I'm not like super versed, but I do know, which I alluded to earlier, that in Japan, the team names change a lot, but I don't know if necessarily the cities change. I think the cities, from my understanding, have generally been pretty similar or close to the same cities in and around Japan for quite a while. And I don't know how long, but it seems to be the same cities.
So you don't have franchises moving around.
Yeah, they're not moving all over to Japan. They're like usually pretty standard, but the team names change a lot. So it can get confusing because, you'll have a team like the SoftBank Hawks, like here before they were the Dai Hawks, and then the Nankai Hawks, and then there were like 3 other iterations. So they can switch around. I know that I think, and Tony, you can speak to this, but when Ichiro was coming up, it was the Onyx Blue Waves, but I don't think that's their name anymore. So there's like, so they change names all the time. So that's one pitfall if you're getting into Japanese card collecting, that the names change. Sometimes they're like even the names of the team, like they're like the Tigers or the Hawks or whatever. They might even change some of that stuff as well. So you really got to pay attention to who it is or what team it is, because they can have a variation of names.
Right.
Well, on that, I think it's worth mentioning too, just that the teams are basically owned by companies, and it's the name of the company. It's a little weird. It takes some time to get used to, but so basically, right? SoftBank in case you didn't know, haha, is not the name of a city in Japan. It is, in fact, a telecom company called SoftBank, and they own the team, whereas Major League teams are generally one guy or woman, in the case of the Mets back in the day, or an investor group, right? But basically, the Japanese teams are owned by corporations, and they have the corporation's name.
Sure.
Although, like Jason he talked about Ichiro's team, right? The Oryx Blue Wave. It's like sometimes the corporation stays the same, but they change the name. So Oryx is, to be honest, like I don't even know what Oryx does. They're kind of a nebulous sort of. They've got, you know, hands in a lot of things, the giant conglomerate, but they used to be the Blue Wave, but now they're the Buffaloes. And they're actually the current Japan Series champions. And that was Masataka Yoshida's team before he came to the Red Sox. But yeah, so the name thing is definitely right. It can be a little confusing.
Gotcha. All right, so I know that both you guys are fans of Ichiro. So
never heard of him.
I've got to see some Ichiro cards. I'm sure you got some.
Go ahead, Jason.
All right.
I gotta take mine out.
Alex, you've seen this one before.
I have seen that before at one time. Yes.
So there is that one right there. That was actually brought to you by the host today, Alex Bowman 53. Surprised me with this in a care package maybe 4 years ago.
And time flies.
Yeah, I know. I got a little weepy. As if you ever seen that video, I talk about getting a little weepy on that one because I was so
Is that the living set?
Yes.
Nice. I don't have that one actually.
Yeah. And then let's see. Here's one that's really cool. We're talking about like kind of like a hybrid. This is what I was going to allude to. I'm glad we talked about this. But something that's another entry point, I think, for one of the guys that was asking earlier. I think it was I forgot who it was. Yeah, my only PSA 10 right there. Exactly. Brought to you by Alex. But if you're not talking about vintage, but what I think is also very cool is if there's players that you like now that are more modern day players, you can collect their cards from Japan, and sometimes they're cheaper because it's a little bit easier to get than it is here because, you know, they might not know how to find them or they don't want them because it's not them in their New York Yankees uniform or whatever.
Right.
And so, for instance, this one right here is a let's see here, a stat leaders card of Ichiro back when he was in Japan, when he was with the was it the Blue Waves? We were talking about the Oryx Blue Waves, I believe. And this right here, and I think it's really cool. He's on the card with Bobby Rose. So there's that. But if you turn it on the front, you're just like, all right, that's fine. On the back is the Japanese.
Oh, wow.
From 2000 Upper Deck. So this was Upper Deck in Japan. So I just thought this was a very cool card. I got it for, not very much money, but it's him in Japan the year before he got here. So I just thought it was a really cool card.
Same with this one. This is one of my favorite cards. Check this out.
Man, he just came out of like a supernova.
That's what I'm saying. It's like an explosion behind him. It's awesome. So yeah, Orlando was asking, like, are there Japanese Ichiro cards? There definitely are. From 93 to 2000, basically. He's got his like Oryx Blue Wave cards. So including, I guess depending on your position, kind of his like true rookie cards would be 93. Here's a cool like lenticular Ichiro. You can't really pick it up on the camera, but this is from 2000. This is actually from 2001, so he does have 2001 Japanese cards too.
I'm trying to see if I have some more. This is one of the ones. It's not from Japan, but it's one of my favorite ones because it just kind of catches Ichiro in like a what do you call it? Like this, like a kind of this like non-baseball moment. Just kind of relaxing.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
That's an awesome card. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, I pulled this out of a pack, and I couldn't believe it's like a short print or some kind of variation. I don't know, but I sent it to get graded. It came back as a 9. but it was like kind of like an unguarded moment. I just thought it was really cool because, you know, Ichiro, if you know anything about Ichiro, which I'm sure people watching this do know, he's a very serious guy on the field. And this is kind of one of those moments where you just kind of say like, okay, that's kind of fun.
While we're talking about it, reminded me that somebody had a comment earlier. Are mascots as popular in Japan as they are in the U.S.?
Oh, go ahead, Tony. I'm sure you can speak to this because mascots are.
So Jason and I, we can kind of share a laugh before anything is even said here because basically the answer is yes. Like, so Japan is real big on like characters and cute stuff and mascots, and pretty much every city, or even like, you know, there are for example, from a context of like Tokyo specifically, Tokyo's broken up into like wards. There's like 23 wards, which are they're kind of like, think of them like boroughs, but they're smaller.
Sure. Yeah.
So like each ward or kind of like borough of Tokyo like has its own mascot, and they put cute characters on everything. So yeah, the sports teams all have mascots and stuff, and they play a pretty big role. I would say like in a baseball setting, it's similar to the major league mascots. You know, they walk around, dance, do stupid stuff, and you know.
But I will say also, not just. I mean, I'm sure you can type in like YouTube on like Google and type in like Japanese mascots or whatever, and you're gonna get like there's ones where there's like it has nothing to do with sports, but just so they have like their mascot crazy. There's one where there's like a Japanese bear that attacks people like there, and the town has a mascot where the bear actually looks like a vicious zombie bear trying to kill people that walk around the streets of the town, and it's like has blood and everything coming off of it. It has like this cute little head, but it's a mouthful of teeth and it's like claws. I mean, they have one where like I'm sure that again Tony can speak to this, but there's a thing called onsen, like that popular hot springs that are natural hot springs. And some towns have mascots where they say that those natural hot springs are from hell. So they have like demons and like devils that are like dressed up like little mascots, and they're running around town like trying to look like they're attacking people, but they're like dressed up like Satan. And they're like all these little outfits, but they have like these cute little heads, but they have like, you know, demonic mouths and eyes and like blood and everything. But they're like, hey, everybody. And the kids go up and give it a hug. They're not even scared. But in America, kids be running for the hills.
Yes, there'd be all sorts of reports and concerns. Yeah.
Yes. So yes. So needless to say, they love their mascots.
Wow. I don't think A's fan Jim expected that.
Right. So he'll be in love if he ever goes there. He'll be mascot out.
Nice.
Just some Japanese Ichiro cards from the 90s.
Here's one of Godzilla, Hideki Matsui.
Nice.
And I like this one here. This is a Japanese card as well from, I believe, is this Upper Deck as well. Yeah. Also 2000 Victory Upper Deck. But there you can see, I don't know if you can see the Japanese there. But, you know, he's another one of those guys that I collected and followed as soon as he got over here. Because quite honestly, maybe I'm wrong, but he was in Japan. I would think that, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Tony. I would say he was probably more famous in Japan than Ichiro was. But Ichiro was more famous here.
Well, there could be something to that. I mean, he did play for the Giants, right? So it's always gonna. Whereas Ichiro, you know, the Oryx Blue Wave, like, right? So yeah, I mean, certainly as a Giants player, I imagine that probably his stature in Japan, also as a home run hitter, would also elevate his status. So you're probably right about that.
Here's Daisuke when he played for the Seibu Lions, I believe, it's Seibu Lions. And here's my other 10. I only had 2 10s apparently. This one is it. But this is one that's all, of course, before he came to America. This is from 2001. I think he shows up in America in 2004 or 5. Daisuke does. But you know, this is one I thought was really cool. It's a really interesting looking card. But
I'll offer a little snippet involving Daisuke and Ichiro in the sort of present times. So Daisuke and Ichiro, of course, they're both retired at this point, and Daisuke is kind of on the sort of announcer or commentator circuit kind of deal. I don't think he's tied to one team, but he's been doing that particularly this year. And everybody is talking about, which is kind of bogus, but like everybody's kind of talking about like how fat Daisuke's gotten. They're like, whoa, man, Daisuke's gotten really, he's packed on a few since his playing days. But in contrast, I was talking to someone the other day, and I said, I think Ichiro could fit into his high school uniform because that dude is so like. I know Ichiro said at one, but like I'm not normal. Like he said, I'm not. So just though he trains and exercises and stuff exactly how he did, like at the peak of his playing days. And the guy, it's like Ichiro looks like it's like his rookie year with gray hair, and I guarantee you the physique is exactly the same. So it's kind of interesting, right? Ichiro, I think, as an update, he basically works with like youth teams now.
Oh, cool.
So he goes to like, I think like junior high schools and high schools around Japan and sort of like works with youth players and stuff like that. And he, apparently they were, because I think Ichiro is still employed by the Mariners. So normally you're not allowed to do that. So if you're employed by a professional team, you're not allowed to actually like coach or mentor like youth players in like an official capacity, but they made an exception for Ichiro. Ichiro, you're the exception. You can work for the Mariners and still do this. So
let me ask you all this question, and maybe that you could ask the chat can chime in. We all know that Ichiro will be a first ballot Hall of Famer, which I think he's a year away, if I'm not mistaken, or 2 years away, but it's pretty close. Do you think he gets in 100%, or do you think no?
This is for me?
100%.
For all of us.
For all of us?
Yeah.
Alex, what do you think?
Sure, yeah. Why not? Yeah. You're talking about 100% of the vote, right?
Right, 100%. No detractors. He gets in 100%.
I find it, I mean, I'm not like a Hall of Fame junkie, so I don't really know, but I wouldn't be surprised. I'll put it that way. Tony, what about you?
I would say, yeah, I'll go yes.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think one thing too is like because Mariano got in with 100%, it's kind of broken the 100% taboo. Where I feel like pre-Mariano, it was kind of like nobody can get 100%. It's just kind of a rite of passage where you can't get 100% because reasons. Babe Ruth didn't get 100%. Griffey didn't get 100%. But then Rivera got 100%. So it's kind of like that taboo's been broken. In terms of Ichiro, I mean, I know that there's a sort of loud, obnoxious minority that will like hate on Ichiro, like he's overrated, he never hit home runs, blah blah blah. So there might be some like snarky butthole who like doesn't vote for him for those reasons. But I'll say Ichiro gets 100%. I think overall you've got a guy who played during the peak of the steroid era who was never linked to PEDs. I mean, obviously look at him, right? And like, so I'll say Ichiro gets 100%. I'll say he's unanimous.
Some of the comments here are like kind of echoing what you're saying, Tony, which is that there's always going to be a couple of people that just stick it to him because they can, even though everybody knows he's going to get in. So
right,
because we'll see.
I mean, Mariano Rivera played for one of the most hated teams and got 100%. It's like nobody hates the Mariners.
Right.
So it's you could have like Boston media being like, well, I'm not going to vote for Jeter because Yankees, right? Well, it's like that's the, Seattle Mariners. I don't know that anybody is like, I hate the Mariners.
Right.
He has to be one of the only Mariners getting in too. I don't think who else went in underneath the Mariners hat. Not very many people.
Griffey, maybe Griffey, and did
Randy Johnson go in underneath the
Randy Johnson go in as a Mariner? I don't know.
That's a good question.
That can't be very many. That's for sure.
Oh, Edgar Martinez.
Oh, Edgar. That's true. Yeah.
Edgar Martinez. Yeah.
Any more cards you guys want to throw up here? Any stunners or players?
Man, I have all kinds of stuff I can do. So.
Oh, nice.
Got some Matsuis. Here's a Japanese Matsui. That's a
Sweet.
facsimile signature, by the way, not a real one. This is cool. Who's that? Kenta Maeda. I love Kenta Maeda.
Yeah.
I got a buddy who's a big Twins fan. He's not a card collector or anything, but yeah, he was happy to see Kenta Maeda back. Kenta Maeda came back, struck out like 9 guys, but I think he might be like injured again or something, or that might be someone else.
Back in the day when they actually used to put stickers on there to let you know it's actually authentic.
Yeah.
Oh man, let's see here. What else?
Peter's asking Tony if you have any more from that 64 set.
I sure do. I can show him.
Go ahead, Jason.
Go ahead, show them.
So I showed Katsuya Nomura. Don't like this dude. You need to collect this dude and know about this dude. Katsuya Nomura, and then I have this is we'll start off. This is the Sadaharu O from the set.
Yes. It's a great
Now, the cool thing about these is that they actually came in 2 backs. Regular backs like this. Just a regular back. This is the Shigeo Nagashima one. And they also came in stand-up backs. So they had like perforated backs that you could sort of fold out like a stand-up picture frame.
Mm-hmm.
And the stand-up backs are rarer. So here's an example of one of the stand-up backs. So this is Futoshi Nakanishi, who is actually a player. I did a video about him. So this is a stand-up back, right? You can see the perforation.
Yep.
So this guy, I actually have a personal anecdote about him. I'm kind of friends with an older gentleman here whose father was a big Lions fan. So Nakanishi played for the Lions. And so we were talking about the name changes last time. So now they're the Seibu Lions, which is a conglomerate. They have railways, they have shopping malls and things like that. But a little bit of a digression, but when Nakanishi played for them, they were the Nishitetsu Lions. And so you'd see a lot of these Tetsu, Nishitetsu, Kokutetsu. Basically, that's referring to railway lines, so railway companies. So railway companies used to own a lot of the teams back in the day. The biggest example that still survives today is the Hanshin Tigers are owned by the Hanshin Electric Railway. So they're owned by a railway company. So anyway, but Nakanishi, my personal anecdote is this friend of mine, he remembers going to a Lions game because his father loved the Lions, but he's from Tokyo, so they weren't in, they didn't really get a chance to see him a lot. So whenever they were around, they'd try to go. But he said that this dude had the biggest arms he's ever seen. So they would sit really close. And he said I was just a kid, but like his forearms were like as big as my thighs. And you can kind of see, look at that guy's hand and his wrist and stuff.
Yeah.
So like, it was cool. Like I heard that before I got this card. And then like, I saw the picture and I'm like, whoa, yeah. Like kind of weren't lying about that. So here's another, some of the players are a little bit lesser. Whoops, sorry.
There you go.
This is Yamauchi Kazuhiro.
What team is he with? Tigers.
Tigers, yeah.
Cool.
But this one is I actually like that it is. This one is miscut. And I've never seen a miscut one except for this one. So
the Japanese won't allow it. They'll burn it before they let it hit the public.
Got a question.
So yeah, those are
do either of you guys have any Japanese Otani cards?
Yep, I do.
So this one's numbered out of 299. This is purple. Purple one there. So this is purple. So there you go. There's one. But yeah, I could see the thing with my situation was, as a lot of you all know, I was still collecting Otani when it was no longer cool to collect Otani. After he had that 1 year and a half that he kind of fell off the wagon, and everybody was like, he's a complete bust, completely overhyped. The dude's a complete joke, blah, blah, blah. I was just like coming in like, whenever you go to like a buffet, you just like go in and slide everything into your plate. I was just taking Otanis and just going all the way across. And so like I have a couple monster boxes filled with Otani cards that are like in his rookie cards, and second year cards. I mean, there's tons. Because I was like, I'm going to collect him no matter what, because he's a Japanese guy. I thought he had a lot of upside, so it worked out well for me.
Yeah.
Hey, Doug, I'm plugging my award-winning Japanese Otani card video. I do have one, so you can check that out if you want. Doug Decon's Cardboard asked if I have Japanese Otani cards. So I do. I'll show some of them. Here's
I want
one.
to see some too. Yeah, let's see them.
So this is from. So again, I do have an award-winning video.
Award-winning.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Let's see the trophy.
It's not award-winning. But yeah, so I've got Japanese Otani cards from so here's one from 2014. This is a Colby. So this is called a star card. This is kind of an insert that Colby. I should probably back up. Colby, at this point, I don't think we've talked about this, but Colby is one of the main card manufacturers at this point. And they actually put cards on chips. So you get like a little individual, nice. You get a little individual serving of chips, and they come with cards on them. So this is another Colby. This is when he got MVP in Japan. So I like this one. Yeah. So Otani's Japanese cards, I guess 2013 to 2017 would be his playing. So you can search for if you want to find Japanese Otani cards on eBay or something. You should check. For example, you could type in BBM Otani. BBM is kind of the tops of Japan at this point. So BBM Otani or Calbee. That's Calbee Otani. And there's also another manufacturer called Epoch, EPOCH. So if you type those, you can find Otani cards. If you want to find them on eBay, I assume I don't, for obvious reasons, I don't get my Japanese Otani cards on eBay, but nice. That's the black gold, right?
Yes.
Yeah, those are cool, man. Those are such nice looking cards. I think I have the who do I have? I think I have Acuna, maybe. That's from pretty recent. Yeah.
Shout out to Charlie and Yumi if you guys are watching. A couple of fans of the YouTube community out in Japan.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Nice.
Why does what is it? What Panini always have these killer looking cards?
Right? They do the full on etching and really nice. I get, Topps is just lazy because, well, we're not going to get into this. This is good vibes, but Topps being the for the longest time, right? The only licensed player in town. So
that's fun. We
can cut corners.
Yeah, well, here's a question for you since we're talking about that. What's the card collecting vibe in Japan these days? Is Topps much of a presence? Is anybody collecting? Who's collecting? How big is it?
Pretty big.
Yeah.
So I can say Topps is big and definitely bigger than it was before, pre-pandemic and stuff. You could get you could always get Topps cards here in Japan, Topps baseball and stuff, but it's definitely at this point, yeah, I mean the Topps products are popular. For example, I couldn't get any Stadium Club Chrome because it was all sold out at my LCS. I couldn't get my hands on it. So yeah, the Topps products are big. And of course, the Japanese cards too. I would say that Japanese collectors are kind of sort of like weirdly not into vintage. I mean, you can't get like Topps vintage cards here. They're just not here.
Sure.
So
But
pretty
like
much
the
all of
iconic
my, vintage Topps cards I got from, the US and stuff. And then just in terms of like the vintage like Manco cards and stuff, there really isn't like a whole lot of intense interest in those.
That's
I would
surprising.
say actually Western collectors are more into them.
Wow.
Darn.
Well, I mean, any theory as to why, Tony? Because it seems like that would be kind of a big thing.
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, like the biggest change has been like O cards are definitely like pricey now. That kind of reflecting like the overall sort of like, like a lot of guys like was like a pandemic bump who didn't go down.
Yeah. Here's a question from Don. Is there a physical Hall of Fame to visit in Japan?
Yes, there is. And I've never been there, but actually, in about a week, I am actually going to meet up with our friend Robert. He's taking a trip to Japan, and we're going to go to the Hall of Fame together. And it's going to be my first time at the Japanese Hall of Fame. So I'm pretty excited for that.
That's so cool, Tony. And I know, like, no pressure, but we'd love to see a video, So
I'll at least try to take some pictures.
Okay.
I mean, if it's allowed, yeah. Who's that, Jason? Is that Ichiro?
No, it's Matsui, Kazuo Matsui.
Kazuo Matsui, yeah. He played for the, I want to say the Astros for a while.
Yeah.
Back when they were bad, not when they were good.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Back when they were the Lastros.
the
The
last,
Astros.
I like that.
Yeah. When they were in the NL Central, it was weird. In the NL Central before the realignment, and the NL Central had like 6 teams, and the Astros were in the NL Central with the Brewers.
That's true. Back in the olden days.
Yeah, in the long, long ago, in the before times.
Before
times.
Oh my goodness.
All right, guys. Well, we can start to wrap this up, but are there any like last cards you guys want to show? Anything you've been holding out on?
I mean, I could show like some of just I mean I could just do a dump of like cool stuff. I don't know if there's
yeah, any like favorites, any, let's say like your 5
Well,
5 or
I showed this recently, but this is my 1951 Barnstorming Tour program with Joey D. And who's that? Do we know who that is?
Ronald Reagan.
Pop quiz time. Who knows who the other guy is?
If you can guess, Tony will send you the magazine.
I will certainly not.
I have no idea. Is he wearing a Tigers cap? I can't tell who it is.
John knows who he is. It's Lefty O'Doul.
Okay. Yeah, never.
Here's another great uncut Menko sheet. I also did an award-winning video on this. Nagashima down there. This is an awesome-looking card of him. And this guy, I would say, is also worth noting. This is Masaichi Kaneda, who is the all-time wins leader, I believe, and also strikeouts leader in Japanese baseball. He's kind of like the Japanese Nolan Ryan. I think he's got like 4,000 something strikeouts and like a bunch of wins. One thing about these guys is like these guys are, their records are never going to be broken just because like I think like basically at this point the very best players in Japan eventually make their way over to the majors pretty much. So a lot of these records, right? Like the for example, I talked about Harimoto's he's the only member of the Japanese 3,000 hits club, and that is probably how he'll remain because Ichiro would have probably had the record, but he went to the Mariners, right? So this is pretty cool. This is like a children's book of Giants children's book with Nagashima on the cover, and I like the back there has
Oh, that's
the
cool.
manager.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome.
Kawakami, he is also a legendary Giants player. Kind of a thing for them, and also, but like in Japanese baseball in general, but also like particularly the Giants. Generally, the managerial hires are made with the heart instead of the head. If you are a legendary player for the team, you can usually have an opportunity to manage the team.
Right.
I guess I'll show this one. This is another sort of program for. This is when the Yankees came from '55 with Mickey Mantle.
Beautiful.
Wow, that's nice. When we get off of here, I'll give you my address so you can get that.
Yeah. All right, get right on that.
Sweet.
So some of my other stuff, I don't know. I have I didn't really. I don't know. Random stuff.
All good.
Jason, you got anything?
No, I'm not gonna try to follow that up after that, dude.
No.
I'm like, here, look at this Jojima card I have from 2007. You'll be like, yeah, okay, that's great, buddy.
Hiroki Kuroda.
Yeah, there you go.
This dude had this was the hardest luck pitcher I ever saw. This dude played for the Yankees and the Dodgers, and he never got run support.
Yeah.
Jason, do you have any more recent players that you think are underrated? That anything that you got nearby?
No, I mean, the few guys that's popped over this year, I haven't watched them enough and haven't heard enough about them yet. Right. To get too excited. I mean, obviously Ohtani, that cat's out of the bag. So, that's not breaking any new ground. But the other guys that popped over, I think with the Red Sox and then I think with the Mets, I think there's a guy with the Cubs, like Seiya Suzuki, I think, or something. I don't think so far any of them have done too much to get me too excited about their futures, but I may be wrong.
Yoshida hit 2 home runs in 1 inning this year.
Oh, there you go.
It's a start.
I think one of them was a grand slam, too.
There you go. But, it's the same song and dance that we all have heard before. Anybody who follows Japanese guys is that, 99% of the, 99% of the time, they're not going to be able to replicate their success in America from Japan. It's going to take a special player. And that's the reason why I feel like, and I could be wrong about this, but it used to be there'd be throngs of Japanese that come over every year, be a wave of 7 to 10 guys there for about a 10-year stretch or so. And then now it's getting whittled down to maybe 2 or 3 a year now or come over because they're not getting the same success. I think that, you're seeing more and more people not take that gamble because they're going to make more money and they're going to probably be more, they're going to probably have better careers in Japan for the most part. So I think some of them are probably seeing the writing on the wall that for every Ohtani, there's going to be a Matsuzaka. so
one guy that is set to come over is Murakami, Munetaka Murakami, the third baseman for the Swallows. So this guy, well, you might have been exposed to him during the WBC.
Yeah.
He kind of had his sort of a coming out party, that's weird, but during the WBC, right? And he basically, this dude, I think he's kind of to start the year, he's kind of struggled a bit, but basically the last 2 years, this dude has just been toying with the pitching over here. Last year, he had basically a video game, balanced breakfast Barry Bonds OPS 1200 or something ridiculous like that, and hit 55 dingers. And so, and he's finally said that he wants to come over. He was kind of mum about it for a while, but the cool thing about him is that he's quite young. He's only 23 or something, and he's probably going to come over in a couple years, so he'll be 25, where most of these guys, part of the problem is they come over really late. So because generally how it works is, so I believe in the major leagues, I don't know the ins and outs of the service time and stuff like that, but I think it's roughly 7 years before free agency. So you have to be, is it 6 or 7? Whereas in Japan, if you want to just be a straight up free agent, it's 9 years of service. in MPB. So of course the other way is you get posted, which means like your team will post you, and then major league teams can bid on you, and they pay a bunch of money for the posted player, and then the major league team has to pay the Japanese team like a fat stack just for getting the player. And I know like the Nippon Ham Fighters, like Otani and Darvish's previous team, they built like a glitzy new ballpark, which is like, in terms of like being modern and kind of like with amenities and stuff, is by far the best one in Japanese baseball now. But they partially funded that with posting money that they got from Otani and Darvish. So yeah, like so those are, but Murakami, he's definitely exciting. And he had some pretty big moments in the WBC. So I would say Murakami is probably one that should be pretty good over here. Or I should say over there from my perspective.
But Roki.
Yeah, and Roki's younger too, though. So on the mound, right, Roki Sasaki is also on the pitching side, he's kind of this guy who's peerless. Like he's just several levels above everybody else. And he'll probably come over too, but he's also younger than Murakami. I think he's still only 23, maybe. So yeah, but yeah, Roki Sasaki's another one to watch. He throws 102 regularly and stuff, and it's not really a question of if, but when he'll need Tommy John. But
right, especially in Japan, that's for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you heard it here, folks. Start selling those cards and prospecting and.
So Stooks, Baseball Cards and Curiosities asked if I go to many games. I usually try to get to a couple a year.
Cool.
I really love going to games here. One thing I like so I talked about the Fighter Stadium being like really nice. It's basically like a major league park now, whereas most of the stadiums here are sort of decidedly kind of like last gen major league. So if I go to Jingu Stadium or something, which is the home park of the Swallows, that's usually where I go. I love the place, but it's like, going to like County Stadium before, Miller Park was erected, or kind of like last gen major league before the kind of like early 2000s, like stadium boom kind of deal.
Right. Right.
So a lot of the stadiums on Jason, like obviously you can talk about that too. You know how it is, like the vibe, right? Like it's definitely last gen and kind of, which I like about it because it's kind of like, but most of them it's like they're not old enough to be like good old, but they're not like new enough to be awesome and new. So they're kind of in that middle ground of like, but there's like a certain charm in that, right? Like, so I really like going to the games. I try to go to a couple games, a year. Actually, in a couple days, I'm actually going to the famous Koshien Stadium. I'm going to a Tigers game in a couple days in Koshien. So Koshien is one of those parks that's like good old. It's kind of the Wrigley or the Fenway of Japan, or it's almost like going to it's almost like how I imagine kind of like almost going to like Ebbets Field must have felt, because Koshien's awesome because it's an old stadium, the outside facade covered in ivy, and basically it's like right in the middle of a residential neighborhood. So you get off the train and you walk there, and the stadium's like right there, and it's where they hold the big like summer baseball tournament, which is like, Jason, you could probably talk about that, right? Like it's kind of like March Madness in Japan, right?
Yeah.
Like high school baseball tournament. So
you just don't want to be a Colonel Sanders, because the Hanshin Tiger fans threw him over into the river when they wanted to try to murder Colonel Sanders out there in front of the KFC. You all got to see a video of that. They completely took out Colonel Sanders after a win. So.
Yeah, so what Jason is talking about is the last time the Hanshin Tigers they were kind of like, I would say, like, so if the Giants are like the Yankees of Japan, the Tigers are basically kind of like the Cubs traditionally.
Yes, okay.
So they have a rabid fan base in a historical stadium, and they don't win shit. So the last time the Tigers won the Japan series was the only time they won the Japan series, which was 85. And as Jason was talking about, the fans just, it was bedlam. Like, so they took here there's like some of the KFCs have these like creepy statues of Colonel Sanders like outside of the KFC location, and the fans there's this thing in Osaka, it's called the Dotonbori Canal, and it's kind of this little canal that runs through a pretty trendy part of town, and the fans threw one of these Colonel Sanders statues into the canal, and it's the curse of the Colonel. So they didn't win after that, and they haven't won since.
Oh, wow.
But they say, like, you know, it's kind of like the Cubs curses or the curse of the Bambino. They started calling it the curse of the Colonel, right? Because
so they
fans,
have to make it up to KFC somehow? Is that the deal?
Yeah, they were partying downtown, and I guess there was a KFC, and
They
saw one of those
Colonel
Sanders statues and threw it into the canal.
Yeah,
which is unusual for the Japanese because they don't really party like that. So
right, they're not really going to go like wild like that, right? But
yeah,
Tigers fans. Okay, another on that point. Tigers fans are kind of known for being a little more rough.
Yeah,
like that. So they're kind of. I think they were like kind of worse before than they are now. Like back in the day, but they're kind of like, I guess like the closest thing would be like Raiders fans. They show up in like just like glitzy, kind of like gaudy out tiger paint, and like it's awesome, man. If you go outside Koshin, you see all these like crazy Tigers fans in like, you know, crazy outfits, tiger face paint, and like, you know, and they just go crazy for it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that's probably a good place for us to wrap it up. There's so much to talk about and lots of cards to look at, but I know already in some of the comments, people have been like saying, I learned a ton. I definitely learned a ton. I got a lot of stuff to look up, a lot of cards and players to look up. So thank you both for coming on here. It was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure.
I have one more comment before we go, because someone asked single season home run record 55, and then Doug said 56 broke O's record. So there's actually, on that point, there's basically two records. The all-time record is 60 or say 60, I think. And that is actually owned by a foreign-born player. I think it's Vladimir Valentin, who's from Curacao, maybe. Yeah. And he hit 60 or something in a season. But O had the like Japanese player record, and then Murakami. So Murakami actually does not hold the NPB record in a single season, but he has the Japanese player record. He beat O's last year. So
O's not Japanese either, but we won't go there.
Half, yeah, and that's another story. So.
Right. Yeah, that's the whole underbelly of Japanese professional sports. So, but yeah.
So that's all. That I just wanted to address that question.
Yeah. But I really appreciate you having me on, Alex. So thank you very much.
Yeah, this has been a blast. Thanks.
I think Alex.
That was Priest.
I think he's frozen. Yeah, look at he's like frozen. Like I guess it's gonna be the Tony and Jason show now.
Are we just hanging out? So I was like, I might have some technical difficulties here, and then ironically, Alex had technical difficulties. And
oh man, look at Alex. I feel bad just to hang up until Alex comes back, right? Like,
I mean, I guess we could hang out for a while and just see if anybody, guys in the comments, if you just want to like shoot some questions.
Right.
Darvish is half Iranian. Yeah, he is. His father's from Iran, right?
Yeah, Darvish is definitely not a traditional Japanese last name, for sure. But so who are you gonna go see play, Tony? When you go see the Swallows play? Who they played against that day?
I usually go when the Tigers play because I'm kind of an adopted Tigers fan. And the thing about it too is like, this is kind of something that's like a little bit sad. It's like basically teams that aren't the Giants or the Giants and the Tigers, as you probably know. Well, maybe the Swallows at this point, or sorry, the Hawks.
Oh, there you go.
Because the Hawks had this dynasty, right? I mean, as you know, I think you're a Hawks fan. Like the Hawks had this just insane dynasty the past decade where they won like 5 Japan series in like 10 years or something, right? So maybe the Hawks at this point, but like besides the Giants and the Tigers, like most of the teams, you couldn't really say they have like insanely dedicated fan bases or anything. So if I go to Jingu, which is the Hawks home park, half the stadium is Tigers fans. Like if you go there, if I go to see the Tigers play the Swallows, and I like going to Swallows games, obviously because Murakami plays, but also because Nori Aoki, who's one of my favorite players, is playing for the Hawks. Or sorry, the Swallows. So anyway, but I would go there, and I usually, if the Tigers are playing them, I go see the Tigers. But like half the stadium is Tigers fans.
That's awesome. That's like being a Reds fan and going, and like over half the stadium's Cubs fans. It makes me nuts. Like
I hate any time I'd go to see the Brewers and like half the stadium is Cubs fans.
I'm like, what? Yeah. So. Well, I'm glad you're back, Alex. We had to hold down the fort, so you came back. So.
I knew you guys would be fine. I'm just back to say.
He said, how many games are in a Japanese season? I don't remember precisely. It's essentially 30 something less than a major league season, right?
Yeah.
Like, so as I said before, like the guy Isao Harimoto is like the only member of the Japanese 3,000 hits club, and partly that's because they have a shorter season, so it's just harder to amass 3,000 hits or 500 home runs or so. Yeah, I think the season is. Jason, do you know the exact number, or is it like?
You're right. It's somewhere like 130 range, I think, or like something like that.
Right?
But 140, something like that. But
yeah, they have Mondays off. That's so. I should be clear. Like, it's not that the season ends sooner. It ends late September, and then they have postseason in October. But they have Mondays off. Which is why there are fewer games throughout the year.
And they start before we do as well, I think, don't they? They start in March.
Yeah, I think they do, right. So they start a little earlier, but they have Monday off all year, every week. Nobody plays on Monday here, so.
Because they're all hungover from the night before.
Probably.
Yeah, they go pretty hard. Those Japanese fans, they can show Americans what it's like to be true fans of their team. They get nuts.
So I guess the Mick had fun when he was here in 55, huh?
Oh, I bet he did.
Oh, that's why he came, yeah.
I'm surprised he didn't come back with a tattoo on his face and a tiger in his bathroom.
Anyway.
All right, guys.
Thanks again. Yeah. I appreciate it, sir.
Guys, if you're not already following the award-winning JP Wisco and Zombie Collector Extraordinaire, make sure that you look these channels up. Follow these gentlemen. Thank you both, and everybody have a great rest of your Sunday night / Monday morning. Man,
thanks for having me. See you guys.
See you guys.
See ya.